Okay, welcome everyone. I'm Xeno Kovah, and we're going to talk about binaries a lot over the next couple of days. It's really going to be drilling a ton of detail into your head. My classes are very much fire hose style teaching, but you're lucky because this is the first class which actually isn't just a, ton of lecturing with a little bit of labs. We have actually a game this time that helps reinforce the material, gives you hands-on experience with using the tools in order to go figure out the information about binaries. So this will be quite a bit more fun than the previous version. The previous version of this class was literally almost entirely lecture, and now we at least break it up. I'll teach you one thing, we'll go and we'll run this game on it, and then teach you another thing. So, as with all my classes, this is going to be released, public released. It's going to be Creative Commons, so other people can take the slides or use them in presentations. Literally, I don't care if people just, take the material and go off and get paid to teach it somewhere else. I just ask that, people give credit where credit's due, and if you take the material and adapt it, that you share it so other people can use it. So, for context of where you are in the larger scope of things, I see a lot of new faces here who aren't necessarily involved with the School of SOC classes this year. So if you just, saw the announcement and based on that you said, hey, that sounds interesting, this is just to let you know that actually this class fits into a much broader curriculum. And so in particular, this year was a little weird in terms of the ordering of classes, just because we were trying to shoehorn things in for this larger School of SOC curriculum, which is much more focused on people who work in security operations centers. So this year, Life of Binaries is being taught before the Intro x86 class. You'll see why you probably would have liked to have the x86 class before when we get to the virus lab and the Packer lab, especially the virus lab. That'll be kind of at the end. It'll be that you'll see a lot of assembly implementing particular features, parsing through particular data structures that we're going to be talking about in this class. So it should be fine. This year I'm assuming that people haven't necessarily or don't necessarily have x86 knowledge, so I'll just kind of explain things at a high level. But if you do have it, it'll be better to go back through and read the virus example on your own later as well. But so this is some of the malware classes that we have. I think some of you may have taken the dynamic malware analysis class. This first year was offered this year. We've actually got a document analysis class that's sort of underway. We've got a person who's provisionally committed to doing it. He's just got other things interfering with him nailing that down. So we're hoping to get that in late spring, basically, but no guarantees there. And then this year, the reverse engineering and malware analysis, malware static analysis classes are going to be taught by Frank Pluzny, and he'll be taking over from Matt Briggs, who went off and got a job doing paid training for other people. So, and then just these classes have, sometimes they fit into only one curriculum, sometimes they fit into many. The x86 class fits into many more than the Life of Binaries. Life of Binaries also, there's this sort of more trusted computing side of, researchy side of things that I'm involved with as well. And so we're trying to build up classes on things like TXT and BIOS and real mode and things like that. So we're working on those as well. But the Intro to Trusted Computing class, we're actually in the process of editing the videos for that right now, so that'll be publicly available soon. The virtualization class, unfortunately, we didn't get enough attendance because we tried to expand it to 3 days and weren't able to get enough attendance there. So it'll be rescheduled for probably late in the spring again, and we're going to cut it back to 2 days again. Hopefully we'll get more people taking it. All right, so this is what you're going to learn in this class. This is a sort of famous picture by Eero Carrera. It's kind of just breaking down all the sort of data structures. So just like in the intermediate x86 class, we've got, big picture of here's everything we're going to dig into. So obviously this is madness, but this is Life of Binaries! There you go. I messed up this is intermediate x86. Yeah, I did it again for the other class, but I'd see later on when I'm going to have like nice little clip show where I pull out my uppercuts and things like that that I do in the various classes, shouting at people. Anyways, all right, so introductions, kind of about me. I finally figured out, so previously on my About Me slide I said, you know, I'm a generalist, not a specialist, but it's hard to argue that when I have increasing detailed knowledge in specialty areas. So I finally found something that I like that sort of describes me better. There's this notion of a T-shaped employee, and so you're broad, you have a lot of general knowledge, so you know, I haven't been doing lots of stuff with network security, but still, back in the day, I read all my RFCs, and you know, I know the details of, you know, IPv6, multicast, and things like that. So got a lot of broad knowledge, but increasingly I've been, you know, specializing in one area, and I think this is, you know, a very good thing to aspire to, basically. You want to at least know what's going on in a lot of different areas, but then you become specialized in one area. This picture is from the Valve Employee Handbook. Valve are the people behind Steam, the game, I don't know if you'd call game engine, more like game portal, I guess, these days. You know, people behind Portal, behind Half-Life, things like that. They have an employee handbook. It's a really good read. You should check it out. I think the citation's in the notes section. They talk about how at Valve, they look for these T-shaped employees, and they have a very flat organizational structure, so they don't, like, you know, have managers and then engineers. Basically, it's a bunch of people. They self-organize around projects where if you can convince your colleagues that, you know, this is a good idea and they should work on it, then they all get together on it. And so they look for T-shaped employees because, you know, when you get 10 people on a project and one of them's deep in this area, and one of them's deep in that area, and one of them's deep in that area, you know, you overall have a lot of deep expertise. You have at least one person who's good at everything. So this is more what I think describes me these days and what I aspire to more. The funny thing is, I'm basically a lifelong Mac person, and I had to learn Windows for work. So this material that we're going to be talking about today, it's basically something I had to learn for a project where I was looking into creating a Packer. And excuse me. So I was working on a project where I had to create a Packer for Windows, and so that required, you know, digging down into the Windows P file format. Then we had to port it to Linux, and that required digging down into the ELF format. And so it's basically just, once I learned this knowledge for this one project, I found it ended up being valuable for other projects, and that's why I wanted to make a class on it, because I think it's useful for malware people. It's useful for, you know, where I use it these days is on system measurement, basically, so measuring binaries in memory. If you know how the P structure is formatted, you can pull out the chunks of memory based on what they would have looked like on disk and then measure them. So it's just knowledge that has found a lot of different uses for me. All right, so now we're going to do introductions. All right, excellent. Good to hear. So I should even say, you know, my own coverage of the compiler topics. My own coverage of the compiler topics was basically more from, so I actually hadn't had a compilers class, but I had all the automata theory and things like that, parsing context-free grammars, and you know, that was enough to cover the majority of the material, but I really was more interested in the part where it spits out assembly, and so I was disappointed when I had seen that the majority of compiler classes didn't actually get to that place. All right, so that agenda is no longer accurate. So the big thing is make sure you ask your questions when you have them, and you'll especially see on the game that we play, you definitely have to ask questions. Though there's the potential for bugs. The previous class got to do lots of beta testing and lots of bugs on the game for the last class. So make sure you ask questions on the material, as well as when you're trying to understand the material by going through the game. That's a good time to reiterate it as well. I find that people who are, you know, can't tear themselves away from the email, they're going to be the ones who are not actually absorbing this material. As I said, it's going to be kind of fire hose style. It's going to cover a lot of information in a lot of depth. So if you're, you know, multitasking, especially this is a warning to the guys on BBcast, I know that, when you've got just one window up, it's tempting to flop over to the email client, but that's basically the leading cause of failure of my classes. So, and I can see failure, and the nice thing about this game is it shows me failure very clearly. I'll show you a picture of failure later. So, all right. So we don't vote on the class schedule anymore because of the benevolent dictator clause. I'm going to try to go for 2 hours here at the beginning when you still have energy. Then we're going to take a 10-minute break. Then we'll do 1.5 hours to lunch. Then take a 1 hour lunch, and then 1 hour with 5-minute breaks after that. But at least now it's not like 1 hour of straight lecturing. It'll be 1 hour with interspersed games. So. All right. So as I said before, the intention of this class was to cover basically starting from source code all the way through running binaries. That still is the intention. If I could, it's just the nature of things here at Minor that, 3-day classes are much harder to get people in for. People can't pull themselves away for that long. So someday I'm going to teach the real 3-day class where we do get to go into all the compiler stuff, and then all the P, and then all the ELF, and then some more Mako. But the intent really is to show, the full life cycle of the program. And so, as I said, this has been useful for me. Part of it was saying, when I was first thinking of this, it was for this Packer project, like I was saying. And part of it was like, okay, can we get the next people who are going to work this, or the people who are going to maintain this software, can we get them the knowledge so that they can continue on with this much faster? It took us a lot of time. People who were working on it, it took us a lot of time reading a bunch of documents, and so how can we optimize this knowledge transfer, basically? So this class will have relevance for the type of areas that were already sort of indicated. Some of it, like the trusted computing stuff, has to do with measurement, and that's more on the defensive side. Some of it's more the offensive side, things like understanding DLL injection and viruses and hacked programs, etc. And I already said that. All right. So, when I was talking about the full life cycle of binaries, what I was talking about was, you have source code. We're going to assume it's a C language. You've got many different .c files. You feed them into a compiler, and what you get out is actually many different object files. So the object files are basically just the compiler saying, for this piece of source code, I'm going to take it, I'm going to parse it, I'm going to spit out some assembly, I'm going to slice that assembly. Even here at this object file stage, we have, it's typically will be using the binary format. So these object files will be ELF files, these object files will be P files. They're not something that you can just double click on and execute because they're each a piece of the program, right? Just like each source code file is a piece of the program. So they're each a independent piece of the program. And so what happens then is you take all the object files and you feed them into the linker. And so each of the object files will have some code, some data, and some references to other code and data that it maybe needs to access. And so the linker's job is to basically splice all these things together into one well-formed binary. And so then now when we're thinking more about runtime, when you have a binary, you double-click on it, you execute it at the command line. The binary is then processed by the OS loader and the dynamic linker. And so loader, linker kind of together here at this point. Dynamic linker basically means runtime linker. And so what happens then is the binary, after having been spliced together from all these object files, has any references to external libraries and things like that. So when you use printf, you're referencing a standard C library. You're not re-implementing all the code in order to print characters to the screen. So you use printf. The linker says, okay, looks like you didn't define anything called printf anywhere here. Oh, okay, you're looking for printf of in some other library. And then it marks down in your binary, this person needs printf from this library. And later on, when the loader is executing your program, it's going to say, okay, which libraries does this thing import functions from? Okay, standard C, and the between Linux and Windows. I won't even say other examples. So you're importing libraries from external to the binary. And so then the loader takes and it loads it into memory, and you get a running program. It just resolves all the outstanding references to code and data. It can be importing data that's exported by other things as well. And so finally we get a running program. And the running program, oh, is it doing it? There we go. The running program will kill us all. All right. So then, there we go. So this is what we would have basically been going into. We would have went down into each of these, lexical analysis, syntax analysis, and so forth. So this is just, the process between source code and object file. There's a lot of subcomponents to that. There's optimizations. There's different phases of analysis of it. But unfortunately, we're not going to be able to cover that today. So again, just to give you sort of a notional view of things, the linker, like I said, you have two object files spit out by the previous process. They have some headers because these, as I said, they're well-formed P binaries, they're well-formed ELF binaries. So you've got your typical binary format headers, and then you've got things like code and data and so forth. And as I said, the linker's job is just to put them all together. In the dynamic malware class, you probably actually saw a better slide than this where it showed like the .text sections of everybody goes together and the .data sections of everybody goes together. Right, and then so at runtime, the output of that was this well-formed binary which has code and data, and it has these imports, and that's sort of the critical outstanding thing. So at runtime, you try to run wikidsuiteapp.exe, that gets loaded into memory. It has its own particular memory space that's isolated from other memory spaces with its own stack, its own heap, and then its own copies of other libraries mapped into its memory. If these copies already existed in some other process's memory, the operating system will generally just try to share those between the different processes. So this is the virtual memory space of wikidsuiteapp.exe, but off to the side there'll be Notepad, and off to the side there'll be Explorer. And so the operating system's job is to kind of use memory efficiently. So if it's already got libc mapped into somebody else's memory, all it'll do is take this virtual memory and point it at the same physical memory that is mapped by some other process. And that's how the operating system will efficiently use memory.